Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Dominic Breazeale is back at it again, calling out another top 10 fighter, saying that he wants to face Andy Ruiz Jr. So this follows up just from days ago where he called out Dillian Whyte, saying that would be a great fight, he's more athletic than Whyte, and that he would come out on top in a fun fight. Similar type of comment here with Andy Ruiz Jr., which I'll get to soon. But first, how has this all come about? Dominic Breazeale, who basically vanished after his one-round devastating knockout, horrific knockout loss to Deontay Wilder in May 2019, surfaces out of nowhere. And I'll tell you why. There's no boxing right now, and the source of these stories, which have been sort of come out days apart, is Sky Sports from the UK. So what they're doing in this lockdown, because there's actually not a lot doing, no boxing, nothing to really preview and talk about. They are calling around different fighters, having interviews, and just asking questions. And this is how this from Dominic Breazeale has come about with Ruiz and Whyte. Make no mistake, it was from the same interview. They've just sort of separated and held back some of the information to run as another story on another day. Because with all this sort of news at the moment being, not much of anything, they're like, well, why would we want to burn off a separate story about Ruiz instead of bundling it together with Whyte? And who knows, they may actually have more information about Breazeale, comments that he's made, that they'll spin off into another story in a number of days. I wouldn't bet against it at this point. So this sort of stuff is going to be happening a lot in the lockdown as these big media organizations that don't have a lot to do right now, there's not a lot of obvious stories, they're actually going to have to do some digging. They're going to have to call around, work different fighters, managers, different people in boxing to try and develop some storylines to talk about to fill websites, column inches and such. So expect to see more of it. And we've already seen some of the louder and brasher characters like Dillian Whyte, like Jarrell Miller, making a lot of noise in the lockdown. Some of the other guys within the division, maybe a bit more quiet, less controversial, they might have been posting stuff like training footage, etc., which boxers should be doing anyway. I don't know why that is considered special in this day and age. They should be working their social media platforms. But the guys that are going to generate some profile for themselves are the ones that are making call-outs and making controversial statements. It's just a reality. Miller, for example, trying to respin the narrative about his failed PED test, trying to say it was a big misunderstanding. Also saying that a fight with Tyson Fury is inevitable, which I think is actually highly doubtful, even though he is with Top Rank. I don't think Fury has Jarrell Miller, in his future plans at all. Dillian Whyte is another who's been making noise, saying all sorts of stuff, trying to respin the narrative about Anthony Joshua, saying that Joshua doesn't want to fight with him, that he didn't want to fight him a year ago, even though Joshua was the one who gave him a shot at his titles. Whyte was the one who walked away because he wasn't happy with some of the terms of the deal, specifically relating to how much money he'd get in the rematch. He didn't want Joshua to get more in a rematch if he lost that first fight. So Whyte, Miller, others, they're saying a lot of things. Eddie Hearn's been out there creating different narratives, some of them false narratives, some of it optimistic stuff just to sort of keep things bubbling along, inventing storylines to keep fans occupied and thinking about boxing, thinking about fights. And we may not have fights for several months now, but a lot of these guys are going to have to revert to this sort of stuff to keep their names out there, their profiles up. And in the case of Dominic Breazeale, he's made some comments about Whyte, about Ruiz, and they've just happened to garner decent headlines because it does come from Sky, and a lot of other media will follow up, including YouTube channels. So in terms of these comments from Dominic Breazeale, which have obviously came from the same interview as the Whyte stuff, but regarding Ruiz. So he says, I think it would be a good fit for me. I think it would be a good fit for boxing. That's the fight fans want to see, me and Andy Ruiz. I'd love to be able to get that rocking and rolling. Joshua made the adjustments and did what he was supposed to do as the bigger athlete in the ring, boxing his way to winning the titles back. You get a big guy that can use his jab and move around in the ring that way Joshua was doing. A guy in Ruiz's situation doesn't stand a chance. That's the same game plan that I would be taking into the approach of fighting Andy Ruiz. Although I'm a fan-pleasing fighter and I'm probably going to go for the knockout at one point. I'll come to those statements in a moment because I think Dominic Breazeale boxing on the back foot, staying at range for 12 rounds, yeah, give me a break. But he also says, we like to throw leather and we like to throw it with bad intentions. Sometimes we're not going to hold back on risk-taking. So when you get a guy like myself and Andy Ruiz in the ring, you're definitely going to see some fireworks. Every time I get in the ring, I'm looking to stop the fight and change the stats. So I would take that glory in giving Andy Ruiz his first professional stoppage. Dominic Breazeale's statements. I like the confidence from Breazeale, but I do think that he's overestimating, one, his boxing ability at this point. But two, his durability seems to really have taken a hit. He's been in so many wars. Even though he likes to fight, a sort of war sort of style, effectively, that's the only way he can fight. He's not a guy that just pumps the jab, works around the ring, looks for angles, all that sort of stuff. That ain't Dominic Breazeale. He ain't built that way. He can't do that for any length of time in a fight. He might be able to do that in the first round or two for a portion of that time, as the other fighter is also involved in a feeling out process. But Dominic Breazeale does not have the boxing ability or wherewithal at all to try to, do what Anthony Joshua did to Andy Ruiz in the rematch. He ain't built that way. He doesn't have that athleticism nor the skill to fight that way for 12 rounds. We've seen him fighting significantly shorter guys in his career. He can't manage to, maintain range. He ends up getting pieced up, beaten up, and some of the fights that he's won, he's been dropped and hurt heavily in. But he is a brawler, he's got heart, and that's one of the things that's been a hallmark of Dominic Breazeale's career. He is a guy that keeps coming, he's determined, he's got heart, although he does have limited boxing ability. He's a brawler, a banger. I think it would be an interesting fight with Andy Ruiz Jr., but if Ruiz Jr. comes motivated, he would be counterpunching Breazeale, into next week. Honestly, Andy Ruiz, his quick hands, and he would be able to find his way to the inside. He would be unloading on Dominic Breazeale. And I'm sure Breazeale might be able to get some shots in because Andy Ruiz Jr., not incredibly tough to find. He's not a defensive maestro. But I do think the weight of all the wars that Breazeale has been in, it's not going to bode well for him in many of these top level fights. I think he is past his best. It's a situation, he's just taken a lot of punishment in his career. He's got a lot of miles on the clock. He's been dropped heavily so many times now, and obviously devastating fashion against Deontay Wilder a year ago. And after that, he effectively went ghost for the best part of 2019. He's only emerged more recently, but some of this, as media like Sky have been seeking him out. But in terms of Andy Ruiz Jr. and him looking for a bounce-back fight, I actually think Breazeale's not a bad option because it's a highly winnable fight for Andy Ruiz Jr. He said he wanted a tune-up before Luis Ortiz. And Dominic Breazeale's probably a bit more than a tune-up, but it is a fight where Andy Ruiz Jr. can have a lot of success. I think his combinations, fast hands, although, he'll be looking for a lot of counter opportunities, he'll be too much for Dominic Breazeale. It's an in-house fight as well. Both are PBC fighters. So there is no real barrier to making this fight should they want to get it done. Breazeale, he clearly wants another payday, and any sort of fight with a guy like Ruiz, Whyte, anyone like that is going to be a decent payday. You could have Breazeale and Andy Ruiz Jr. headlining a card. Certainly not a pay-per-view card, and that's what I was saying about the Dillian Whyte fight. In terms of it being a pay-per-view, there's no real interest in that sort of fight because Breazeale, even though he thinks he's still an elite level heavyweight or something of that nature, he's not. He's a guy at this point that you could almost feed to up-and-coming top prospects. He's almost reached that sort of gatekeeper level. And I know for some people, they're like, oh, well, he's only lost to Joshua. He's only lost to Wilder. But you look at the record, he's been pieced up by a lot of guys. He was lucky to win the Amir Mansour fight. He had a real war with Izu Agono that he could have easily lost. And he's really taken, outside of those sorts of fights, there isn't a lot of meat on the resume. Even a guy like Carlos Negron, who's a somewhat obscure heavyweight, was really giving Dominic Breazeale all he could handle until Breazeale managed to catch him in the 9th or the 10th round. So Breazeale, he is there for the taking for a lot of heavyweights right now. And he probably knows that, his time in the sport may be limited. He's got a lot of miles on the clock. So he'll be looking for the biggest paydays possible. And you can't blame him for that because he is a prize fighter. But he is losing to Whyte. He is losing to Andy Ruiz Jr. I have no doubt about that. How about you? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.